It was a humid Tuesday morning in August when Richard Nelson, the newly appointed police chief, stepped out of his car in the heart of Blue Ridge. The small city sat quietly between the rolling hills of North Carolina. Dressed in a simple plaid shirt, worn jeans, and old sneakers, Richard didn't look like a man who had spent over 20 years climbing through the ranks of law enforcement. That was exactly what he wanted. Richard believed in seeing things as they truly were, not through the polished filter of scheduled meetings or carefully prepared greetings. As a black man stepping into a leadership role in a department surrounded by rumors of misconduct, he wanted to see what really went on behind closed doors. The best way to do that was to blend in. The precinct's parking lot was alive with activity. Officers moved in and out, chatting casually, some laughing, some rushing toward their cars. Richard looked around carefully, noting the tone of their interactions. A few glanced at him curiously, but paid little attention. That didn't surprise him. His appointment had only been announced a few days ago, and he had deliberately chosen not to make his arrival public until the official inspection later that morning. He adjusted the brim of his cap and took a deep breath. The weight of his task pressed on his shoulders. He knew what awaited him: resistance, discomfort, and confrontation. But Richard had faced worse before. Still, this job would test him in new ways. As he approached the building, faint laughter echoed from inside. Richard quietly entered through the side door, unnoticed. The buzz of voices filled the air, along with the smell of stale coffee. The fluorescent lights glared against the polished tiles as he walked slowly through the hallway, observing everything. Groups of officers clustered near desks, talking or reviewing reports. No one seemed to care about the stranger among them. Then a sharp voice broke through the noise. "Hey, you!" Richard turned. A white officer was striding toward him, a smug grin on his face. His badge read, Officer Daniels. Behind him, a few others leaned against the wall, smirking as if expecting a show. "Lost, are we? This isn't a shelter," Daniels said, his voice full of mockery. "You need to take that mess somewhere else." The words hit Richard like a slap. He froze for a moment, debating whether to reveal himself or let the situation play out. But before he could decide, Daniels stepped closer, raising his voice for his audience. "Didn't you hear me? Get out of here. We don't need people like you hanging around." The officers behind him laughed loudly. Richard's jaw tightened, but he stayed calm. He tried to speak, but Daniels leaned in even closer, his face just inches away. Then, without warning, he spat directly into Richard's face. Time seemed to stop. The warm spit rolled down Richard's cheek as laughter echoed around him. One officer slapped the table, laughing so hard he bent over. Another muttered something about putting riffraff in their place. Richard's pulse pounded in his ears. He didn't move for a moment. Then, slowly and deliberately, he pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his face. His voice, when he finally spoke, was calm but sharp. "Is this how you treat everyone who walks through these doors?" Daniels smirked. "Only the ones who don't belong here." The laughter grew louder. Richard said nothing more. Instead, he turned and calmly walked away down the hall. Behind him, the laughter faded into uneasy murmurs. Moments later, the intercom crackled. "All personnel to the briefing room." Richard kept walking, now heading toward the main office. It was time. Inside the briefing room, officers filled the space with chatter, some sipping coffee, others trading jokes. Daniels leaned casually against the wall, still enjoying the morning's entertainment. At the front of the room stood Captain Harris, a stocky man with a gray mustache. "All right, settle down. We've got an important introduction today." The noise faded. Curiosity spread across the room. "As most of you know, Chief Caldwell retired last month. We've been waiting for his replacement, and I'm pleased to introduce our new chief, a man with a long record of leadership and a clear vision for this department." A few heads turned toward the door as Richard stepped forward, now holding a folder marked with the precinct's official seal. His calm steps echoed in the silent room. The sight of him stopped everyone cold. Daniel's smirk disappeared. The color drained from his face as realization hit him. The room fell utterly silent as Richard walked to the podium, set down his folder, and looked out at the stunned crowd. "Good morning," he said evenly. "My name is Richard Nelson. As of today, I am your new chief of police." No one moved. The air felt heavy. Daniel's face burned red as whispers rippled through the room. "When I came here this morning, I came in plain clothes because I wanted to see this department through an unfiltered lens. What I witnessed was eye-opening." A murmur ran through the crowd, but Richard raised his hand for silence. "In just a short time, I have already seen behavior that is not only unprofessional, but completely unacceptable. Let me make one thing absolutely clear. The culture that has been allowed to grow here ends today." The room stayed quiet. Daniels shifted uneasily, staring at the floor. Richard's tone hardened. "Respect is not optional. It is the foundation of what we do. Without it, we fail each other and we fail the people we are sworn to protect." He paused, letting the silence weigh heavy. "This morning, some of you laughed as a man was humiliated for no reason. You thought it was harmless, but that man could have been anyone: a civilian, a father, a neighbor. Every single person who walks through these doors deserves respect, whether they wear a badge or not." No one dared to move. Richard continued, his voice low but powerful. "Change is never easy, but there will be zero tolerance for behavior that disrespects the dignity of others, whether they are colleagues, civilians, or anyone else." He stepped down from the podium and walked toward the group. His calm presence was enough to make several officers look away. He stopped a few feet from Daniels. "Officer Daniels," he said, his tone sharp. Daniels flinched. His earlier confidence was gone. "You," Richard said, locking eyes with him, "represent everything broken in this department. When you spat in my face, it wasn't just me you disrespected. It was the badge, the oath, and the very community we swore to serve." "Chief, I didn't know," Daniels stammered. "That's exactly the problem. You didn't care to know. You didn't stop to think before you acted. You assumed that the man standing in front of you didn't matter. And that assumption is why this department has lost the trust of its people." No one made a sound. The tension in the room was suffocating. "What I witnessed," Richard continued, "wasn't just one man's mistake. It was a reflection of a culture, one where bullying and prejudice are tolerated, even encouraged. That ends right now." He walked back to the podium, his voice rising slightly. "I have spent my career fighting for justice, not just on the streets, but inside departments like this one. Change won't happen overnight, but as long as I am chief, we will move forward with integrity, respect, and accountability." He turned to Captain Harris and nodded. "Effective immediately, Officer Daniels is suspended pending internal investigation. And for anyone who thinks this is just a warning, think again. This is the first of many changes." Gasps spread through the room. Daniel's face turned crimson. He stared at the floor, humiliated. "This isn't about revenge. It's about standards. If you're not willing to meet them, this is not the place for you. But if you are ready to do better, to be better, then we'll move forward together. Just know this: I will hold every one of you accountable." The meeting ended in silence. Officers filed out quietly, avoiding eye contact. The usual laughter and chatter were gone. Richard remained at the podium for a while, watching as Daniels stormed out, his pride shattered. Other officers walked out slower, their faces a mix of guilt and reflection. Back in his office, Richard sat down heavily at his desk. He exhaled deeply. He knew this was only the beginning. Changing years of toxic habits would take time, and not everyone would stay. But he hadn't come to Blue Ridge to make friends. He had come to make a difference. The phone rang. It was Captain Harris. "Chief," he said, his voice uncertain, "I just wanted to say, you handled that better than most would have." "Thanks, Captain. But the real work starts now. I want a full report on Daniels, complaints, records, everything, on my desk by tomorrow." "You got it. And, Chief, I think you got through to them, in a good way." After hanging up, Richard allowed himself a small smile before turning back to his paperwork. In the weeks that followed, the station began to change. The laughter in the halls